Tonight on NewsWatch, the 41st annual March for Life. Thousands brave the cold conditions, seeking an end to abortion.
Plus, the start of the Syrian peace conference, a less than friendly beginning to the talks aimed at ending the Syrian civil war. And CBN News takes an amazing look at how God is moving among the tribes in the Arctic Circle. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin. And I'm Heather Sells. Today marks the 41st anniversary of the Supreme Court decision legalizing abortion. Every year on this date, tens of thousands gather in Washington, D.C. to protest the Roe v. Wade decision.
And despite below freezing temperatures and inches of snow on the ground, this year's March for Life was no different. Paul Strand brings us tonight's top story from the nation's capital.
Free, we will abolish abortion signs. I am the pro-life generation signs.
As pro-life advocates marched in the bitter cold, they knew huge battles loom on every side of the abortion issue. Opponents of the killing encourage pregnant women to go to pro-life pregnancy centers rather than abortion clinics. So the clinics and their allies have been trying to regulate such centers out of business. Peggy Hartshorn represents some 1,800 centers.
Abortion clinics are closing in the United States. At the height, we had about 1,700 abortion clinics. We're down to just over 500, but pregnancy centers are multiplying. We have over 2,000.
The theme of this year's march is fighting for the adoption option. Unwed and pregnant, Whitney Wall decided to form an adoption plan rather than abort, and she now encourages other women to do the same.
I just remember when I had decided to make the adoption plan for my son, the boxes and boxes and boxes of profiles that I got of couples that were waiting for a family. It's just amazing to think of all the people that are relying on these women to make the right decision.
One battle inside the pro-life movement is whether to use gruesome images of aborted babies to ram the truth of these murders into the public's consciousness. That's what Mark Harrington was doing in D.C. during this year's march, showing such images.
America is complicit in abortion. You have to see it to understand it. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and nobody can explain it with words alone. I mean, that's the problem. It's all a bunch of rhetoric. Once you see the victims, you understand the injustice.
The Pro-Life Action League's Eric Scheidler marched in Chicago this Sunday. He says one battleground is just getting people to realize a human life is a net positive for the world.
Many people believe that when a new child comes into the world, it's a big cost, a cost for the parents, a cost for society. But we're finding that simply is not the case. In fact, a new study has just come out showing that every child born, on average, contributes $217,000 to the national economy.
Scheidler pointed out polls show more and more Americans are turning pro-life. Now he's pleading that all those people take action.
The only way we're going to be victorious in the end is if every single person who recognizes the unborn child as valuable is willing to step out of their comfort zone and share that message with others.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the March for Life in Washington.
And coming up a little bit later on NewsWatch, CBN News takes an in-depth look at the case of Roe v. Wade and how a push from a few liberal judges got the Supreme Court to approve abortion in America. Stick around for that.
Freezing temperatures remain up and down the East Coast tonight, and that cold is making cleanup difficult as some areas struggle to dig out for more than a foot of snow. Ephraim Graham reports.
The storm was 1,000 miles long, stretching from Kentucky to New England. Proof winter is far from over.
It's crazy. It's pretty wild.
This latest polar freeze has 80 million Americans buried under heavy snow. Some are seeing just a few inches. Others are seeing a whole lot more. More than a foot of snow fell in New Jersey, 11 inches in the middle of New York City. And even though the snow is stopped for now, ice continues to wreak havoc on the roads.
Took me 3 hours to get here from Boston.
A lot of people should have just stayed at home today.
This bus lost control on a New Jersey interstate, flipping onto its side. Flying isn't proving to be any easier than driving. The day began with more than 1,000 flight cancellations, leaving passengers stranded and frustrated.
I was wondering if I would be able to reroute that flight.
The deep freeze is expected to stick around through the night and for a few more days. Forecasters predicting more bone-chilling cold and possibly even more snow. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Overseas, American pastor Saeed Abedini has been transferred to a political prisoner ward in Iran. The American Center for Law and Justice reports he has been able to see a prison doctor, and his family says Pastor Saeed is getting better meals. But even with the move, the pastor imprisoned for his faith remains in the deadliest prison in Iran, and concerns over his deteriorating health are growing. The ACLJ is urging the U.S. government to make Pastor Saeed's freedom a priority. And for more on how you can join the millions calling for his release, visit our website, cbnnews.com.
World diplomats are in Switzerland trying to find a solution to Syria's deadly civil war. Fighting continues to rage on the battlefield, and it's now spreading to Lebanon, where a bomb exploded today in a Beirut neighborhood. As John Waggy explains, the prospects for the Swiss conference don't look good.
When the talks opened, even the world's top diplomat, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, had a hard time sounding hopeful.
The challenges before you and before all of us are formidable. Nevertheless, your presence here raises hope.
But it didn't take long before Ban himself was in a testy exchange with a representative of Syria's Assad government, after his speech had gone on for more than 20 minutes.
Can you just wrap up in just 1 or 2 minutes?
No, I can't promise you. I must finish my speech.
The UN's diplomacy and peacekeepers have failed to stop a Syrian bloodbath, with more than 130,000 dead and millions of refugees in 3 years of fighting. U.S. policy has been all over the map on Syria for months, alternating between threats of war and diplomacy. In Switzerland, Secretary of State John Kerry took a hard line against the Assad regime, saying there is no place for him after the talks.
That means that Bashar al-Assad will not be part of that transition government. There is no way possible in the imagination that the man who has led the brutal response to his own people could regain the legitimacy to govern. One man and those who have supported him can no longer hold an entire nation and a region hostage.
Opposition leaders at the talks agree.
If they are really human beings, they have to stop what they are doing. They destroy Syria. 2 million houses they destroy. We have 10 million people, Syrian, out of their homes, 3 million out of their land.
But outside the talks, Assad supporters protested what they see as a U.S.-led railroading of Assad.
We are here for Syria, against this propaganda, against this American propaganda. We're going to tell the world we are one army and leader and people.
While the delegates were gathering in the Alps, an explosion rocked a Shiite stronghold in southern Beirut as violence from the Syrian civil war spreads to Lebanon. It was one more sign that the talks will most likely be just another prelude to more fighting. John Waggy, CBN News.
Israel says it has stopped an al-Qaeda plan to attack the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv and a conference center in Jerusalem. The country's internal security agency says it has arrested 3 Palestinian men claiming they were plotting bombings, shootings, and kidnappings at the conference center. The agency also says that al-Qaeda militants were going to attack the American embassy in Tel Aviv the same day. Israeli security officials say the men were recruited online by an al-Qaeda operative in the Gaza Strip.
Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper just wrapped up a 4-day state visit to Israel. He held a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, announcing a strategic partnership between Israel and Canada.
Canada and Israel both want to see a Middle East that is more stable, secure, and free. But the challenges facing the region are serious indeed. And to better meet those challenges together and to cooperate in the field of international affairs as a whole, our 2 foreign ministers have just signed a memorandum of understanding formalizing the Canada-Israel strategic partnership.
I've said repeatedly I'm not here to single out Israel for criticism. We've got more than enough people standing up in the world ready to do that. You don't need me. I'm here to talk about our shared values and interests.
Harper, who is an evangelical Christian, also addressed Israel's parliament. He says Canada supports Israel because it's the right thing to do and of strategic importance.
Coming up, from a small jurisdiction case to a national argument for legalizing abortion. A look at the history of Roe versus Wade. New details are emerging about how abortion became legal in the United States. And it turns out that Roe versus Wade was not even meant to focus on legalizing the procedure.
Yeah, as Paul Strand reports, that changed when 4 liberal judges determined to do away with abortion restrictions.
When the Supreme Court took up Roe v. Wade, it wasn't even supposed to be about the broad question of legalizing abortion. It was supposed to be a small case about who had jurisdiction over abortion prosecutions. But lawyer Clark Forsyth at the Americans United for Life has looked into the justices' personal papers and files to discover how Roe morphed into a ruling that defied public opinion and forced legal abortion on the U.S. In his book, Abuse of Discretion, Forsyth relates how health emergencies caused 2 conservative justices to suddenly retire in 1971 and flip the court from conservative to liberal.
It empowered a 4-3 majority, 4 justices who were bent on eliminating the abortion laws to push ahead during those twin vacancies to use the cases to declare a right to abortion and eliminate the abortion laws.
Those 4, Douglas, Brennan, Marshall, and Stewart, lobbied and pressured a wobbly Justice Blackmun, the author of the Roe ruling, to join them in their cause.
And he was pushed continuously month after month, at point after point, by Justices Douglas, Brennan, Marshall, and Stewart to expand the decision, sweep away more regulations, declare a broader right to abortion, and so forth.
Forsyth says the court was swayed by the 1960s sexual revolution and the belief at the time that a population explosion was about to cause global famine.
The population crisis was a big theme of political rhetoric in the late 1960s. It influenced the justices, clearly.
Pro-lifers have fought the idea right till today that abortion is safer than childbirth, but the justices accepted that notion by faith with little proof and were swayed by it.
Abortion is safer than childbirth. There was no evidentiary record on that. There was no trial. There were no medical experts, no cross-examination.
Abortion advocates hoped at the most it could be made legal within the first 12 weeks of life. But then a Blackmun staffer pushed him to make abortion legal before a fetus's life could be viable. And then the justices arbitrarily decided that would be 28 weeks.
The pro-abortion organizations, the medical organizations, never argued for a right to viability. They were only essentially arguing for a right in the first trimester or the first 12 weeks. And so when the sweeping ruling comes out, even the most pro-abortion advocates were just astounded at the scope of their what they thought was their victory.
Forsyth's book documents how the justices then decided to tag on that any abortion would be legal if the pregnancy threatened the mother's health. But that could mean mental or emotional health, not just physical health.
That gives us abortion on demand from conception to birth, and it also ranks the U.S. as one of just 4 nations of 195 around the globe that allows abortion for any reason after fetal viability. Those 4 nations are China, North Korea, Canada, and the United States.
Forsyth believes Roe v. Wade can still be overturned because the sweeping decision so went against the will of the American public, both then and now.
It not only conflicted with public opinion in 1973, but it conflicts with public opinion today. I mean, the court's edict is abortion for any reason at any time, and today only 7 to 9% of Americans agree with that, a tiny minority of Americans.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell and his wife are fighting charges filed against them in federal court. Prosecutors allege credit card debt drove the McDonnells to break federal law and accept gifts and loans from Star Scientific CEO Johnny Williams. In exchange, they say Williams was given access to state officials who could help his business. McDonnell says he regrets his judgment but did nothing wrong.
I did nothing illegal for Mr. Williams in exchange for what I believed was his personal friendship and his generosity.
McDonnell says no taxpayer money or government benefit was given to Williams' company.
Up next, journey with us to one of the coldest places on Earth to see how one man is reaching remote tribes with the good news.
Welcome back. People living in the Northeast are seeing some cold temperatures, but it's nothing like the Arctic Circle. Winter there means months of darkness and temperatures of minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
But in one area of Siberia, a man is braving that cold to share the gospel with remote tribes. George Thomas brings us his story in tonight's Focus Report.
Locals call this place Yamal.
Yamal means the end of the world.
And in many ways, it is.
There are no roads here. People use frozen lakes and rivers to get around on reindeer or snowmobile.
Latitude 70 degrees north. Longitude 70 degrees east. The Yamal Peninsula sits in the deep, frozen Siberian tundra above the Arctic Circle.
So I've got about 4 layers on here. Putting on my last layer of clothing.
The temperature here fluctuates between minus 30 and minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Never worn so many clothes like this in my life. But we're almost ready.
It's a little after 6 a.m. Peter Hudi, our Siberian guide, does last-minute checks.
That right there, folks, is reindeer skin. This is our sleigh. I mean, in essence, this is how we're going to be traveling into the tundra on the back of this.
The sleigh is attached to a snowmobile.
I have to make sure we have enough rope and other emergency supplies in case we get stuck.
Is this dangerous?
Это опасно?
Опасно, да.
Yes, it is.
Our destination this morning, a 4-hour journey deep into the wilderness to meet a nomadic family. 2 hours into our journey, we stop for a brief moment.
It's about 9:25 in the morning. 9:25 in the morning, and the sun has yet to rise. And we're hoping to catch that before it rises. Let's go.
The sun here shines only for a few hours during the winter. When it does appear, normally around noon, the sunrise, well, it's something to behold.
This is a special place.
Peter belongs to the largest nomadic tribe called the Ninets. He's more than just a guide. You see, he's a Christian. And for the last few years, he's been sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with his tribe and others who live here in the tundra.
When I became a Christian, God gave me a new heart. He also gave me a new heart for my people. I go out on my snowmobile meeting these nomadic families and telling them about the love of Christ.
The Ninets are nomadic reindeer herders. The word Ninet means child of a deer.
This is, in essence, the lifeblood for the Ninets people here on the Siberian tundra, because their meat as well as their skin fetch a lot of money in the villages.
Our food, clothes, shoes, homes, our transportation, everything comes from them. Without reindeer, we cannot survive.
And learning how to survive in the tundra begins at an early age.
All my children were taught from a young age how to live in the harsh conditions. It is our way of life, but if you are not careful, you can die out here.
The women take care of cooking, sewing clothes, and putting up the teepees. The men are hunters and care for the reindeer. And when it comes to skinning the reindeer, the entire family is involved. The hide is used to make the teepees and clothes. Blood and raw reindeer meat are often consumed to get vitamins.
We use every part of the animal.
Peter is among a handful of evangelists reaching the Ninets people. He's been visiting Ustinia's family for a few weeks now.
He comes here to tell us about God. We have good conversations.
He's supported by a local Siberian church and Russian ministries, an organization focusing on spreading the gospel in the former Soviet Union. He says it all begins with friendship evangelism.
I brought presents for all the children today. Each box is filled with toys, school supplies, and a children's Bible. We have to build relationships first.
Modern technology, such as the snowmobile, cell phone, and generator, have certainly made life a little easier on the tundra.
Before, I had to rely on reindeer to get around. Now the snowmobile allows me to travel farther distances to meet families.
There are no verifiable numbers, but Peter estimates some 500 Nenets people have accepted the Lord in recent years.
There are still thousands more who have yet to hear about Jesus.
So for now, he continues to traverse the harsh landscape of the Siberian tundra in search of more people to share the good news of faith in Jesus. George Thomas, CBN News, in the Yamal Peninsula, northern Siberia.
Up next, how one faith-based film is making a name for itself among the Hollywood elite.
And finally today, the faith-based film Alone Yet Not Alone has received an Academy Award nomination.
Yeah, making it one of the big surprises of this year's award season. The film has been nominated in the category of Best Original Song, beating out artists like Coldplay and Taylor Swift for the nomination.
I will not be bent in fear. He's the refuge I know is near.
The Los Angeles Times reports the song plays a crucial recurring role in the film. In the official film release, it's performed by Christian author and speaker Johnny Erickson Tata. And the production team includes Emmy Award winner and previous Oscar nominee composer Bruce Broughton and Regent University alumnus Kenneth Altman as production manager.
Tell you what, she's multi-talented.
She is. Who knew? You know, I've heard her sing in her radio show, but now she's up for an Oscar. Hope she gets it.
Fun to see.
Yeah.
That's all for this edition of Newswatch.
Yeah, thanks for watching. Have a great night.